Reds, golds, pinks, violets. Let's talk about red rising. G'day to all you lovely people and welcome back to my channel. I'm Kathy and today I want to talk about this. Red Rising by Piers Brown. Okay, my brother has been recommending this book to me for years and I finally read it. Red Rising is a futuristic dystopian story which actually takes place on Mars. Red Rising is actually the name of the first novel as well as the series. At the moment there are 5 published books and I believe there is a 6th one coming out next year, 2023. But originally I think it was just a trilogy of 3 books. I am going to want to talk about some spoilers, so I will be splitting this video into 3 parts. The first part will be without spoilers, then I'll have a spoiler part, and last a summary and score for the book at the end. And timestamps will be in my description box below. Okay. Now the world that Brown has created, people are divided into colours. There are reds, there are greys, there are violets, there are pinks, there are greens I think, and yellows, and whites, and golds. Each of these different colours have different roles in society. The grey are, for example, I think meant to represent police. The pink's purpose is pleasure. The violets are creators. The reds, in essence, are the slave labour. And the golds are the rulers of this world. As the book is written in the first person, our narrator is a red, Darrow. The Reds are a working class group of people who are mining Mars to make it habitable for mankind. They have been told that the Reds and their work is humanity's last hope. That's what they've been told. And Darrow finds out that it is all a lie. That in fact Mars has been habitable for I think even generations, and that people are living on the surface while the Reds continue to toil underground. With the help of a rebel group, Darrow infiltrates the Gold's command school. And that I would say is the major plot of this book. Now I wanted to talk briefly about the writing style, the world and the characters. Given that this is written in the first person, obviously our perspective is limited to what Darrow observes. And sometimes I do find first person narratives very frustrating because I know that it's going to be biased based upon what they're feeling. They're not going to observe everything that I may want to see. And Brown is very spare with his language. This is not a bloated book at all. Perhaps the only thing that was lacking was a little bit more descriptions regarding the places that we were visiting. Also, this book predominantly concentrates on the reds and the golds. I would have liked to have learnt a lot more about the other colours as well and what role they play in this world. We are given very brief descriptions of that. But I wanted to know more about, say, for example, the violets or the greens or the yellows, the obsidians. I have a general idea as to what their role is, but we didn't really get to interact with all the colours. Perhaps that is something we will see in future books. I hope so anyway. Given that this is written in the first person, and let's not forget our character Darrow, which I forgot to mention earlier, is only 16 when we start the book. So his perspective is quite limited. His knowledge is limited. That I didn't feel took away from the book though. I felt like I was learning as he was learning how this world operates. The pacing was very even. I didn't feel like it dragged all that much. Perhaps there were a couple of slower parts than others, but overall, it was a really fast-paced read for me. Considering I'm not really a fan of first-person narratives, I kind of forgot that as I was going through the book. I really liked the writing style. I think Brown is a good writer, and I can only imagine how much he will improve in future books. I hope so anyway. And given that Red Rising is his first book, I think he did really well. As for the plot itself, I think it was not always predictable what would happen. In fact, certain things that did occur completely shocked me. And that's all I can say in this section of the video. However, I cannot deny it was very reminiscent of Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card or The Hunger Games. It even reminded me of the film Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger. This isn't an original story as such. We have an elite group that are oppressing other groups. That is nothing new, but the colours was a clever idea, and the society that we see, whilst it is very reminiscent of our own society, it is much more extreme. Despite the fact that this story did remind me of others, it differed enough to make it really interesting and unpredictable. I certainly could not predict everything that happened in this book. And I really loved how people were divided into colours. It kind of doesn't give you a lot of room for any individuality, does it? If you are a red, you're supposed to behave like a red. If you're a gold, you're supposed to be like all other golds. One of the first things you read in the book is that democracy is a lie and that obedience is key. When I read that, I thought, wow, yeah, I think I would be killed straight away in this world because seriously, I like to question things. They're not really allowed to question things. This is the status quo. Obviously, the conflict between the different colours doesn't get resolved in this book. I think I've already mentioned that the world could have done with a bit more fleshing out, but given that we do spend a fair bit of time in this command school, I can forgive that. I'm assuming that in future books we will get to see a lot more of this world. As for the characters, well, our main perspective is Darrow's, our narrator. I do feel I understood this character well. He is very young, obviously. He's only 16, but he is driven. He is angry. I think anger is his predominant characteristic throughout the book, but it is a cold anger. Rather than allowing it free rein like most, say, teenagers would, he has a lot more control. He is a very smart, resourceful, and driven character. Clearly bent on revenge, and regardless of how angry he is, he doesn't lose sight of his mission, which is to bring down the golds from the inside. My impression was that he is looking to liberate the reds, and perhaps not just the reds, perhaps the other colours. But given that he is a red himself, his main concern is the reds, to free his people, his family. But I also feel that he needs a bit more development. Other characters in this book include Cassius, a young gold student. I loathed Cassius, I really did. I just found him so hypocritical and arrogant and very privileged. I found it really hard to like this character. Another character we meet is Severo, I think, or Servo. Now this character I really liked, but I have a thing for underdogs, and he was a bit of an underdog, and yet so resourceful, so smart. He was definitely one of my favourites. There is also a character called Mustang or Virginia, another gold student. She was actually an interesting character. Many of the golds that we meet are just ruthless bastards, arrogant and ruthless. Even though Virginia is a gold, she doesn't appear as ruthless. She seems to be more aware of some of the injustices that take place. That is the impression I got. It might be that in the future I'll see a different side to this character, but she was one of the likable characters in the book. There were so many that I really despised actually, like Cassius or Antonia. Overall, I thought the characterizations were good. And keep in mind, because it is first person, we are only seeing Darrow's perspective of these characters. But I thought they were well drawn. They seemed real. In fact, I would say that most of the gold children that we meet at this school just seemed like typical, very privileged, wealthy young kids. Perhaps that's being a bit harsh, but that is one of the things I love so much about this book, is it seemed to reflect our own world. We have this very privileged, wealthy group called the Golds. If we take away the colours, these groups are recognisable in our own society. The Golds, I think, represent the very wealthy or nobility, very privileged. The Reds represent the working class or slave labour. Then the other colours represent the middle classes, lower, higher, etc. This world in Red Rising is a much, much more extreme version of our own society. But what is sad is that I think it's a possibility. There were so many great things that I loved about this book. Here we have this character who is told this is his only role in life, to be a Red, and yet he is able to infiltrate the Golds and pretend to be one of them. And that, I think, shows that anyone is capable of achieving, as long as they are given the opportunity. That was the message I took away from the book. Didn't matter that he was a Red. Darrow is a very capable young man who could match the Golds easily. And there were also so many great themes about exploitation, about privilege, using it wisely. Something else I really liked is that this world that Brown has created does touch on Greek and Roman mythology. I did like that actually. Most of the Golds have Roman names, for example. And I also enjoyed seeing them quoting lines from Plato or Cicero. That was cool. What actually does take place in the combat school is one of my favourite parts of the book, though sometimes it was horrifying what did happen. It actually did remind me of Lord of the Flies by William Golding, I think it is. I read that in high school and it made such a deep impression on me that under this thin veneer of civility, we can be savages. I just found that horrifying actually. And what takes place in the combat school is very reminiscent of that. I think that's all I can say without going into spoilers, so let's jump into the spoiler part. Where do I begin? Wow, okay. Of course, when you start a book and people are being hung because they are singing a forbidden song, you immediately feel sympathy for this group. So of course I hated the Golds immediately. What a surprise. They are ruthless bastards if you ask me. And what I'm very curious about is just how they got to this position where all these other colours are subjugated by them. How did they accomplish this? How did they get the obsidians to do this. I suspect I know how, but I'd like to learn a bit more of the history of this world. But when any group is exploited so viciously like the Reds are, they're almost starved. And yet they are the ones who are providing power for the Golds. It is just so callous. So yes, I hated the Golds immediately. And that is probably because of my working class roots, I can't deny it. And then we have Darrow become one, or transform into one. It just goes to show how resilient this young boy was, what he went through to accomplish his mission. But what I found really interesting is when he was part of this command school, he started forming some attachments to these people, which was to be expected. And I can see it is going to cause conflict in the future. But was anyone else as shocked as I was that they actually had to kill another student? That just horrified me. That goes so far beyond what is civilized, what is acceptable. Just because a person may not be as strong as you would like, do they deserve to die? Wow, yeah, that just shocked me so much, and I couldn't believe it was actually happening. I thought, no, I can't be reading this. And that was not the only shock in this book. I should mention some of these awful things that these students did: raping, killing, maiming. Wow, honestly, this is just ruthless to the nth degree. It just seems so extreme, but I guess that is how these Golds got into power, being prepared to be utterly ruthless. Cassius. Yeah, the reason I despise Cassius so much is he is the biggest hypocrite in this book. He killed another student as well. How can he possibly justify blaming Darrow for surviving? As Darrow said to him, if it was you and your brother, you would have killed him too. And he's right, he would have. When he first met Darrow, he made some snide remark about how well Darrow did on the exam. And then when Darrow said something, "Oh, you offended me." I mean, come on. What, one rule for him and one rule for another? But perhaps that was because Cassius comes from a famous family and Darrow doesn't. They even seem to have different classes within the Golds themselves. That's what it seemed like. That's why Servo and his father can't get anywhere. Something else I really liked was that even though the Golds' power positions are meant to be based on merit, that clearly does not apply. That is malleable when the Golds want it to be. For the Arch-Governor to bribe the proctors so that his son can win, yeah, I mean, clearly corruption is rife even with the Golds. I think that says it all, that even their society, as separate from the others, is not perfect, is very flawed, is corrupt. And it is certainly not based on merit. Severo is one of the most resourceful characters in this book. But like his father said, he's not going to get far ahead because he doesn't look as good as some of the other Golds. But seeing these cracks in Gold society, it kind of gives me an inkling as to how Darrow is going to exploit their weaknesses and bring them down. But I also think he is going to be extremely conflicted because he has formed attachments to Severo, to Virginia. And I have to say, I just loved that he took Olympus. I really did. These proctors deserve to be brought down. Yeah, I really enjoyed that whole taking of Olympus. I was not surprised that Darrow accepted the Archgovernor's offer. It made sense. He is the most powerful gold. If he wants to bring them down, that is where he should start. I thought the book ended well, though obviously there are a lot of things still to be resolved, but I expected that. I'm also hoping to find out who is the son of Ares. I was wondering actually if it might have been his father. I'm also wondering if it isn't his father, could it be a gold? Now that would be really interesting if it is a gold. I guess I'll have to wait to find out. Okay, let's summarize. I loved this book. Yeah, I wish I hadn't waited so long to read it. I flew through it. It is very well written. It is a very fast read. It is fast paced. And it seems so much happens in one book. If you like science fiction, dystopian stories that also has a lot to say about societies, politics, power, then I think you will really enjoy this. As for a score, I've thought about this. I'm going to give Red Rising 7.5 out of 10. Which is a very generous score for me. I'm usually very tough, but I just loved it so much. I know I'm going to read it again because I really enjoyed it. Well, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know if you have read Red Rising and what your thoughts are on it. You know, I would love to hear your opinions. And you can put it down in the comments or you can contact me on Instagram. Thank you all so very much for hanging out with me. I really do appreciate it. And if you like this video, then you can do the usual. You can like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, as it helps my channel to grow. I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I will see you next time. Bye. Schwarzenegger. God! Total Recall with Arnold.